Donna shared details of her wild 3-year involvement with Gafni, intense first-hand experiences of Gafni lying, manipulating, exploiting, swindling, abusing, and betraying them. This includes 19 women who were sexually involved with him.
And meanwhile, the sex was getting more dark and unpleasant for me. The organization he ran in Israel by Hadash blew up when there was a big scandal involving him abusing students, employees. Several women came forward. It was really bad. I have become the main person that people come to when after they've left his orbit and need to kind of process like, what the hell was that? But he is so good at getting other people to betray their integrity for his sake, to protect him, to lie for him, to manipulate others for him, because he's able to convince them that, well, it's not for me, it's for the larger cause. It's part of the strategy of focusing on the people who are making the allegations against him so that people then don't pay as much attention to the actual allegations. He's very good at using language and words to twist things and turn them against people. When I saw that Aubrey took on MG, I said to my husband, like, this is not going to end well.
Before I begin, here is a note to our listeners. This episode contains a personal story and reflections that some may find challenging. It includes first-hand accounts involving public figures and spiritual dynamics that we feel are important to bring to light for the sake of collective discernment and healing. The experiences shared are based not only on Donna's direct lived experience, but also on consistent, repeated accounts from others who have had personal encounters with Marc Gafni. We've also referenced publicly available materials, videos, and writings, many of which are linked in the show notes to support our understanding of the broader pattern of behavior being addressed. Our intention is not to issue legal accusations or to cancel anyone. Rather, we aim to open a necessary and long overdue dialogue about how spiritual trust can be manipulated, how discernment can be clouded by charisma, and how silence often protects power at the expense of truth. We invite you to listen with discernment, empathy, and courage, and to explore the resources provided if you'd like to learn more.
Welcome back to the Awakening Conversations podcast. My name is Kate, and I'm here with my co-host Amanda. And today we are being joined by Donna Zerner. Donna is a former book editor and publishing consultant who worked behind the scenes in the spiritual and self-help world for over 30 years. In 2003, Donna met Marc Gafni when she edited one of his books and became his administrator, board member, close friend, and lover. In 2004, Donna found herself caught up in the mad world of protecting and defending Marc Gafni from public accusations of sexual abuse of teens. In a YouTube video titled "The Shadow Behind the Light," Donna shared details of her wild 3-year involvement with Gafni, which continued until 2006, when things blew up due to a sex scandal in Israel and she ended contact with him. We highly encourage you to watch that video. It is linked below. Since that time, several dozen people have shared and continue to share with Donna intense first-hand experiences of Gafni lying, manipulating, exploiting, swindling, abusing, and betraying them up until very recent years. This includes 19 women who were sexually involved with him, often causing them serious trauma. Most of these stories have not been told publicly. Marc Gafni's misdeeds span a timeline of 43 years. And Donna believes that she probably knows more about Gafni's history and secrets than most people. Because of that, he has tried very hard to silence and discredit her. She also believes him to be a dangerous man, and due to current public concerns arising about him after Aubrey Marcus's recent podcast episode, she feels a moral responsibility to speak out. Donna, welcome to the Awakening Conversations podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here. It's a very big step. You're a very brave woman, considering what you have been through already, and we'll get into all of that. But before we begin, before we hear about your story and the deeper why of what your intention is to share with us today, we just want to set up this conversation. And we're really having this conversation today because there was such a large response to the Aubrey Marcus, Marc Gafni, Vailana Alana episode recently. And people were really sensing something was off. There was obviously the conversation around polyamory, but there was also this conversation happening about who is Marc Gafni. Many people really felt an energy from him that was unsettling or repulsive. A lot of people use the word icky. And this was before they really even had any sense of what his history might be. Many have confronted Aubrey about Gafni's presence within the comments section of his videos, even his Instagram posts, with many of those comments being deleted, or comment sections of videos with Gafni, which he has several, being closed completely. And instead, Aubrey is continuing to avoid a direct conversation. He points instead to a 2-year-old video where Gafni addresses the allegations that have been made against him alongside his romantic partner, as though her presence in some way might validate his innocence. So why is this a conversation that should matter and that we want to have now? It's really been a concern of the public about MG, as I said, this manipulative energy that he has, this language that he uses, that many felt very repulsed by and very unsettled by. And I think the thing that was part of our experience too was that there was sort of some insinuation that if you didn't quite understand this language, then maybe there was something about yourself that you needed to look at. And so your mind was being sort of asked to really address those concerns you had in your physical body and maybe override them and doubt that there is anything wrong here, and simply it's more of your own inner feelings that you should look into. But many have continued to say, well, we just straight up don't feel like that's the case. We feel like, our inner feelings are valid, but not really receiving a response to that. There is a large collective shift happening right now, where many of us are really seeing spiritual leaders and guides and gurus and even influencers having a very important role in integrity and discernment as we go through this larger collective. So our intention today is to not cancel a man, but to really help cultivate a collective discernment by revealing how spiritual trust can be weaponized. And Donna is speaking now because so many of us are asking questions and not receiving any answers. Her story is really going to help to illuminate a pattern of evasion, manipulation, and spiritual distortion. And it's time to name this, what is occurring, so that people can begin to trust what they feel. So, Donna, thank you again. This is a big step to come forward because, as we're going to hear, when you initially created your video, I think it was 2009 or it was at least 9 years ago, there was a public response to that from Gafni, which was not very nice. So I just want to commend your bravery in coming forward right now. And I want to give you a space now to speak a little bit about your connection with Gafni, your experience with him, and what is this deeper why of coming forth now to share your story and to use your voice.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to be here. It's very scary to be speaking up, but I do feel very supported by the two of you. And that's important because it's hard to talk about him publicly. And there's good reasons why very few people have. So as you said, I talked about this in the story I told in 2016. And I shared my experience of meeting him. I was his book editor. We became very close. He was never my spiritual teacher. We just became really good friends. There was a lot of chemistry. We became lovers. It was exciting. I felt very drawn to the charismatic energy of his ability to reach disaffected Jews with his Jewish spiritual teachings in ways that very few people were able to do. And so I just really believed in the value of his teachings. And then around 2004 is when these allegations came forward of these two girls, now women, who he had supposedly allegedly molested when they were 13, 14, and 16. And he worked very hard to convince me that it was all lies, and he had enemies who were jealous and trying to bring him down. And it was interesting. I never met anyone like him. He could look you right in the eye and swear. He swore on the lives of his children. He swore just, I'm innocent. I didn't do this. There was a letter, whatever. We'll get into all that. And I believed in him and I believed in his work. And I became recruited to this team and I talk about this in detail in the story, so I won't go into too much detail, but I ended up defending him, supporting him, getting famous rabbis to sign documents, asserting that he had great integrity and was not capable of doing that. And he should be able to teach anywhere because he was in this process of really expanding his reach and becoming, very well known on the larger wisdotainment circuit of, in the US. I felt like we were doing important work. This team that was defending him, supporting him, making sure that people knew that he was innocent of these allegations, which I just assumed he was. And I had no way of contacting these anonymous girls. And this happened so long ago. And yeah, so, one of the things he does, which I didn't really understand at the time, is he tries to attack the sources of who is putting out the accusations. And so there was a place called the Awareness Center, where that's where most of the information about him was. And I managed to dig up some damaging information about the woman who ran that center. And I passed it along to him, and he ended up spreading that information in a way that really destroyed her credibility and ruined her life. Basically, she lost all her funding. She became homeless ultimately. And it was because of something I dug up. I didn't think he would use it in that way, but what he did was he changed the conversation from Rabbi Mordechai Gafni has been accused of sexual abuse of teens to this woman who runs the Awareness Center was once on Oprah saying that her family murdered babies on Torah scrolls, something like that. He's very good at changing the focus, focusing on who's accusing him. And then people forget, wait, what does that have to do with these allegations? So I felt so it just became very intense. He recruited me to take care of his money after he got split up from his wife because he said I was the only person in the world he trusted enough to do that. I didn't want to do it. He was very manipulative, everything was, if you do this, if you don't do this, it'll destroy the Jewish people. It'll destroy the whole movement. It'll destroy the future of humanity. It's not for me. It's for, the state of Israel, or, it was always very grandiose. And he just pushed and pushed and pushed. And meanwhile, the sex was getting more dark and unpleasant for me. And I just saw many examples of his sex addiction, and it wasn't good. And but I couldn't figure out how to. I felt very caught up in his world, and I tried to extract myself, but it was very hard. Then in 2006, the organization he ran in Israel by Hadash blew up when there was a big scandal involving him abusing students, employees. Several women came forward, and it was really bad. But that was my excuse to step away, and the trance broke, and I started talking to the other women who he had forbid me to talk to, his assistant in Israel and other board members and people who it turned out were all, in sexual and weird relationships with him. And once we started talking, it became clear why he didn't want us talking to each other, why he had isolated us, why he had disparaged us to each other. Because once we started talking, like all the lies became so clear. And it was amazing how much he had lied about everything. I didn't know it was possible to lie so much. He lied about everything. And we could see it because we're talking, you go, wait, when he said he was going there, he really went there. Wait, he got money for that twice. Wait, he took, it was everything, little things, big things. Okay. So that was 2006. From then on, somehow, I don't know how it happened, but I have become the main person that people come to when after they've left his orbit and need to kind of process, like, what the hell was that? What happened? And like Kate said, I've talked to 19 women now who were sexually involved with him, and often really, really bad experiences. And none of them will ever go public. Maybe a few have, but most will never go public. I've talked to dozens and dozens of former board members, supporters, funders, musicians, editors, publishers, students, teaching partners. I mean, people in every kind of capacity who were once very close to him, who supported him, who defended him, who trusted him, who ended up feeling really betrayed, very exploited, very manipulated, very used by him, and trying to make sense of, like, again, what was that? What happened? And feeling some sense of shame, like, how did I not see going in what was going on? But back then, so I just have to say, back then, up to 2006, it was kind of pre-social media. It was hard to find out information about people. And since then, it's a little easier to get information out there. But it turns out, like, a lot of the stuff that he's done too happened, even early days in the 90s, early 2000s. And, it was just hard to get it out there. But I've seen it, and it's kind of shocking to me.
Would you say that hearing the stories that you recognize common patterns amongst their stories, and that's how you were able to believe that each of the stories happened because there are commonalities between what they were sharing? Totally.
That was what was interesting, is that every story from every woman, every story from every, student, they all had common themes. Like, he made us feel important. He made us feel like we were doing something really valuable for the state of the world, or the Jewish people, or the evolution of consciousness, or whatever his current big, theme is. And we were willing to sacrifice a lot for that, because he got us very excited by that goal. And so much so that we kind of lost our sense of, wait a second, I'm doing this all for him. It's not really for that grand theme. It's for him. But he's kind of, there was a lot of this, like, when I try to challenge him on something, when I try and point something out to him that something doesn't feel right, or this doesn't feel in integrity, he won't listen. He'll just scream at me. He'll say, you're not sophisticated enough to understand, or, this is the future of the Jewish people is at stake. You have to do this, whatever it is. And, there's a sense a lot of people have of losing their sense of agency around him. And I want to read something that someone said. Okay, so Terry Patton worked with MG really closely in the integral world. And one of the things he said about him in a really powerful piece that he wrote that's online is, the egregious violations I saw firsthand were not primarily sexual. What, in my experience, has been most outrageously diabolical is his unique way of getting inside people's heads and subtly casting a spell on them, and then using that influence to influence or manipulate others. To be used in this way is a form of abuse. To add sexuality to it is even more hurtful. So it's funny, because he often will kind of make fun of people who say, oh, he put me in a trance, or, I felt like I was under a spell. He'll make fun of that, but it's what it feels like around him. He's very powerful. And it's interesting, because watching the reaction to him from the Aubrey Alana video, and seeing how many people said some version of, that guy is infiltrated with entities, something like that. I don't really think in that language, but it was very consistent. I mean, I saw it again and again and again. There's some very dark, powerful energy attached to this man. And it's very disturbing. And it's funny because when you're around him, you don't sense the disturbing nature of it until you're kind of in too deep,
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
so like Aubrey doesn't get it because Aubrey's in deep.
Mm-hmm.
And but for me, it was fascinating that the collective got it. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's a consistent thing that people feel kind of like there's a lot of mind fuckery going on with him. And what's amazing to me is the people who have been drawn to MG and who've worked with him and the women who've been involved with him are very smart, like amazingly smart. And afterwards, you're like, how did I not see this? But I mean, that's part of the diabolical nature of it is, he's smarter than us in that regard, and I would say one of the most painful things he does to people, and this is part of my shame, and this is part of why I'm speaking up and why I felt compelled to continue to speak up. But he is so good at getting other people to betray their integrity for his sake, to protect him, to lie for him, to, manipulate others for him, because he's able to convince them that, well, it's not for me, it's for the larger cause, whatever the cause is. And you kind of, for me, it was a lot of ignoring my gut reactions, which, I mean, thank you, MG. I've learned to never ignore my gut reactions again, but when you do that a lot, you get in a lot of trouble. And I got in a lot of trouble. It's like, it's a moral injury, I would say. He inflicts a lot of moral injuries on people, and he's still doing it to this day.
And then once
we'll talk
he gets
about it later.
people in compromised situations, then he has power over them, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We'll get to that. Yes. That's
Yeah.
yes. So, so right now why I'm speaking up partly it's not because of what my experience was with him, which was bad, but it wasn't particularly noteworthy. It didn't ruin my life or anything. A lot of good things came out of it. I met my amazing husband because I was with MG. There were a lot of gifts, a lot of lessons. I'm not here to punish him, to humiliate him, to cancel him, nothing like that. I just feel like the truth about him needs to come out. And the problem is, if you look online and see the stories about him, well, first of all, he's spent a lot of money, time, and energy manipulating the internet so that his material goes up first, and it's really hard to find the allegations against him. But also, again, most of his victims, most of the people who have been hurt by him, most of the organizations that have been damaged by him, they won't go public. They just never will. They're ashamed. They feel maybe a little complicit, or it's too confusing, or mainly a lot of people are afraid of him. But also they, just energetically need to move away. I think that's the most important thing for people's healing. When you get in that deep with someone that dark, is you just kind of need to move away and not think about him, and, just to heal and get your boundaries back and stuff. And so for me, it's been interesting because I can't really move away. I feel like I have some repair to do around the damage I did. I caused that woman at the awareness center, which she's forgiven me. She feels that I was a victim too. And, she's not holding that against me. And the 2 teen girls who I helped cover up what happened to them, also we've talked, and, they get it. But I just feel like also, because I'm in this unique position of knowing that he's guilty of so much more than most people will ever find out, I have to help get the truth out there, especially now, because people they watched that video, they're like, who the hell is this guy? And they're trying to find information. It was so interesting to me watching all those response videos, and people are trying to, they've Googled him and they're trying to explain, well, I think there was a 14-year-old and then there was something in Israel, but like, no, it's so confusing. And he's very good at sowing a lot of confusion around like, well, what happened and when was that? And so nobody got it right. Nobody. And so, part of my intention here is just to lay out, as much as possible, what feels important and what people should know, around, what he's done and who he is, and that people should know it's far, far, far more than the public accusations that people know about, and that he's that he talked to Aubrey about on that video that he made 2 years ago.
Regarding that confusion for our listeners, we haven't mentioned it here, but we've done 2 episodes about the whole situation with Aubrey Marcus, and I did a lot of research about him leading up to the second one, and I did like multiple hours worth, and I found myself in a state of utter confusion. And then I didn't feel confident sharing anything with certainty, because there was this huge field of confusion. Like, what is my gut telling me? What is then I watched a video of him speaking and he got in my head. And then when you contacted us, Donna, and you shared your story, and I shared this with you before, but for our listeners, when I was listening to you experience what it was like trying to make sense of these allegations, and that same energy of confusion that I felt when I was researching, it was the same exact feeling. I'm like, oh, he creates this bubble of confusion. So you doubt what you feel and you override it, and that's how his words can manipulate us and have us dismiss what we are feeling inside our gut, as you were saying. So I felt that just researching him, there is this, like, he's created it with his own words that he says, but then what he's put out on the internet also creates that cloud of confusion.
Yep.
Yeah. And I want to add to, something that you said there, like, so many people that have been involved with him or are coming forth and had these troubled experiences with him are extremely intelligent people. And, another episode we did as well as we're looking into kind of how people can find themselves in cults. And we referred to one particular podcast series called Bewitched, and there's educated women who went into a business container, like a business coaching container, that turned into something very malicious and, cult-like. And they all said in this episode, or this series of episodes, like, we're smart people. How did we get here? And I think it's important to understand, and I think we're seeing that too in Aubrey's situation. It's not for anyone to find themselves, entangled with somebody like this, or an energy like this, a person like this, that it's a lack of intelligence. It's often, the smart people who are, or intelligent ones who are also active seekers of growth and have, as you said, this desire to be of service, to have an impact. And really what he's doing there is recognizing that desire within these intelligent people, speaking straight to that desire, that want to grow, that want to have a higher level experience of their lives. I feel in many ways that's Aubrey's experience. He's a seeker of, growth and his edges and his peak experiences and living his truth. So he comes in with the promise, I have the thing that is the bridge between your intelligence and your desires, and I know how to do it. And every time I think of this particular situation, because we know, and we'll get into perhaps how he's been dispelled from, he's no longer a rabbi, he's been ousted from Israel. He was ousted then from the integral spirituality community. And it just feels like he's popped up again, I feel like it's like a weed. He's come up from the earth into this place where there's the promise he can make to this influential guy, speaking straight to his desires. And what struck me when I did the research as well was how way back when he was still a rabbi and still in Israel, it was about polyamory all the way back then. And so to see that, and then we've got this conversation in 2025 where he's popped up in a polyamorous conversation with a man who said he didn't want to do poly anymore. Okay, that's really interesting how that seed has sprouted again. And I think a lot of people felt he was sort of a key player in this conversation. It's like it was his agenda to have his idea pushed to see, look, it can happen, it can work, here's this framework.
We're calling it radical monogamy
in the field of
and
erotic
now
mystics.
Aubrey is disavowing that, right? Because I imagine he was influenced. Didn't mean to cut you off there, Kate, but just
that's okay.
Put that in.
But the key too there is like it's there's the intelligent person who's a seeker and has these desires for growth. He comes in with the promise, and it's not like you instantly have this bad reaction to him, or you're having your needs met, you're having this promise met, you're having someone come and speak to this desire. And it's a slow burn, right? It's a slow burn of dissonance that comes in, or disconnect, or the signs start to build up, because in that moment you're in that teacher-student relationship where you're open to the new ideas, you're willing to try them on. So there's that porousness, so he can kind of, really speak to you and kind of, it feels like enmesh in your life. But it's that over time where you get yourself into that compromised place, because it's the slow integration of things and the learning and the time spent that intelligent people can find themselves in these situations. Was the long way of how I wanted to get to that, is that, it's not just about people who, we can easily say, and there's so many times that, again, speaking to kind of in cult-like behavior, but these leaders like this, that how did people get themselves in these situations and do things that compromised their values and made them go against their own intuition, as you spoke to. And it is not that lack of intelligence. It is merely that over time kind of blending of the relationship where, he's come in to speak to that desire for your impact. And yet over time, there's an entangling and an enmeshment that puts you slowly in that sort of subtle way into that compromised position. And, I just think that's important to understand, that that's where the fog feeling comes in, right? Because you almost then like, how did I get myself here? Because it is that slow process over time that he's really allowing or making that happen for people.
Yes. And it's part of that kind of grandiose, like the part he's able to tune in the part of each of us that wants to be of influence in the world and have an impact. And he really, I think one of his superpowers is pinpointing people's gifts and vulnerabilities and then exploiting them for his own ends in such a subtle, insidious way. You don't even quite realize what's going on until you're in too deep. But he's a chameleon. And so with Aubrey's talks about polyamory, and he adapts himself to whatever milieu he finds himself, and he has to keep reinventing himself. He does it all the time because he keeps getting thrown out of different worlds, different denominations of Judaism, and then Israel, and then Judaism altogether, and then integral, and then the New Thought world. And each one he adapts, he finds the language, he finds the lingo, and makes himself to be an expert in that, whatever that subject is. And, he's a good faker, he's full of words. He's a good adapter,
So let's just go pull on this thread here. We're talking about him going through these different communities, and in listening to a lot of what I've heard his excuses is that there's this coordinated campaign smear against him right there. And so to me, that my first initial read on that was like, maybe, but that doesn't make sense for all these seemingly random people, groups of people to come together. Let's do a campaign against this perfectly good, pure human who has done nothing bad to us. Let's just smear him. To me, that what feels more credible is that people are coming forward with their experiences, and he is labeling these campaigns. That's my intuition on it. So I imagine in a response to this video, this is also going to be labeled part of that campaign smear. But what have you experienced with regards to the whole defense of all these allegations as being a campaign smear against him? Very coordinated, I've heard him say.
Yes, smear campaign or witch hunt. He uses that a lot. And it's part of the strategy of focusing on the people who are making the allegations against him, so that people then don't pay as much attention to the actual allegations, right? And so it's funny that he's been talking about smear campaigns for so long. And yet, again, like you said, throughout his entire life, like, it's like one after another. Like, why are people, he makes it sound like it's the same people, but it's different people. First, when I was with him, it was this Rabbi Blau that hated him for no good reason and was trying to destroy his life. And then it just shifts, but it's always, he loves that word, smear campaign and witch hunt, because he does everything he can to make people not look at the actual accusations. And, to me, I mean, part of this is Darvo, right? Classic abuser strategy, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. So he is always the victim, always. And he has this pathological inability to take responsibility for what he's done, or to even question, like, I wonder why this woman now feels upset, years later, that I got in her bed when she was 14, or whatever, like really, really curious, or really like, oh, maybe I crossed a line with this staff member or whatever. Like, no, because I think part of it is he's an Enneagram 3, very unhealthy Enneagram 3, I would say. And, image is the most important thing. And, I think it's very, very hard for him to, admit anything that would make him look bad. And 3s have an amazing way of lying, including to themselves, and deceiving themselves and convincing themselves that whatever they did was fine. And so, I think I'll say it must be amazing to be Marc Gafni, because he has been doing this game for 40 something years now of being followed by allegations, new ones, old ones, new ones, old ones, new ones, old ones. And, he used to have he would have one document that would prove that he was innocent of this one thing. And then it became 2 documents, and then it became 10 documents. And now it's 1,500 pages and 93 videos on his website, to go through life with having to defend yourself all the time and having to keep on changing the story of why these people are attacking me personally. The one thing I would say, what happened in 2015, 2016 with the New York Times article, and then a whole bunch of other articles came out and new women came forward and his third ex-wife spoke up, and a lot of things happened that were not actually part of a coordinated attack, but he didn't do anything new at that point. And so I could understand why he would say, why are people bringing this up now? It doesn't make sense. I didn't do anything new. And also, why is all this coming up now with Aubrey? Is there a new scandal? Is he accused of molesting anyone now that we haven't heard about publicly? My theory is that his karma is just chasing him around until he actually heals his stuff and does true tshuva. Tshuva is the Hebrew word in Judaism, when you really do sincere repentance and remorse and repair. And he has never even attempted that. And so his misdeeds keep following him and showing up every 5 years, 7 years, whatever. It's I had a therapist once who she said, MG will eventually cook his own goose once again, given enough time, if he has indeed not finished his inner work. This is the nature of trauma. The energy of his past history is driving the ship, and he thinks he is the captain. Mm-hmm. So I would say that is what's happening. He keeps digging a bigger hole, and having to create more defenses. And I'm frankly shocked that Aubrey is showing such a lack of discernment around because there's so much more information out there about him. But he's also, as we've seen, works very hard to muddy the waters and charm people. And he did this thing a few months after he met Aubrey, when Aubrey's father suddenly died, and it was a really challenging time for Aubrey, and MG was right there and kind of took on a role of rabbi and pseudo father figure. And I think it was very healing for Aubrey at a very, shocking, traumatic time. And that's where there was a connection that got very cemented. And now he's in way deep. But I would say, I just want to give an analogy, which is, so say Aubrey wants to buy a new house and he finds a dazzling, beautiful house, and the realtor or the previous owner is like desperate to sell it and says, oh, this house is great. You don't need to do an outside inspection. Here, I have 1,500 pages of an inspection we did. You could totally trust it. Oh, and whatever you do, don't talk to the neighbors and don't talk to any previous owners because they're all liars, and so Aubrey does that, and he trusts this charismatic realtor, and he buys this new house, and so because he doesn't get an objective inspection, he doesn't find out that the foundation is rotten, and there's black mold, and the wiring is faulty, and he doesn't talk to the neighbors, so he doesn't find out that there's rats in the yard, and that the house used to be a meth lab, and that every previous owner left, within a few years because it wasn't as it was represented. So here's Aubrey in this beautiful new house and invites the public in. It says, look at this great house. And the public is walking around and they're going, this feels off. I feel sick in here. Something does not feel right in this house. And we trust Aubrey, or we used to trust it. How could we trust him why would he live in such a place? Mm-hmm. So anyway, so I would say if MG is the house, I'm the one who has talked to most of the neighbors and the previous owners and has done a much more objective inspection. And so I have a lot of the information that Aubrey doesn't. But I just want to add one thing is that the biggest scandal that really destroyed MG's life more dramatically than the other was when his organization in Israel, by Hadash, blew up. And just to keep it interesting, for those who don't know Hebrew, by Hadash means new house. So it just feels like there's something meaningful here. Aubrey's got this place and everyone else is picking up on something, but he missed the opportunity to do some real due diligence. And he did the thing that MG wanted him to do, which was, read all his documents and listen to him and only talk to the people that he told him to talk to. But he does it in a way that makes it seem like this is objective, but it's not, because he's very good at creating this murky field of what you think is truth, and it's so far from truth.
I want to just share for the audience that there is a whole website called Who is Marc Gafni, and that is the website that Donna is referring to, where he has put out an enormous amount of content discrediting the arguments and the people that have come forward. And so Donna, I want to share something else, but I'll ask the question now. What did him putting out 17 videos against you, did that allow you to want to come forward even more, or did that shut you down? As I imagine that's what he was attempting to do in terms of putting out all this information to tear you down, that to see like if it had the effect that he was hoping it would. And if it did, I imagine that's preventing other people from coming forward when they see, oh, if I speak up, if I share my story, then I'm going to have all this negative information about me on the internet. And so I'm going to stay quiet.
It was not fun. It was not unsurprising. I'm not the only person that he did a bunch of videos attacking, but I did get the highest number of videos. So I win the game, 17. He thinks he does protest too much, but it was kind of insane. I mean, so just for context, after I did my story, which was it was through a storytelling theater company that I was part of in Portland. And my story was not about attacking MG. I did not name him. I used a pseudonym. pseudonym. And if I had wanted to attack him, I would have used very different details. The point of that story was to have an opportunity for me to look at like what happened there. It was 10 years after I ended it with him. What happened how did I ignore so many red flags? How was I complicit? How does this kind of thing happen? So it was really about me. It wasn't about him. And I didn't want it filmed. But the way this theater company does, you can only tell a story with them if they allow it filmed and put on YouTube. So, it went out, and he has all these theories about how I did it in cahoots with the other people on this smear campaign, and nobody else knew I was doing it. I just did it for myself. And it was very healing for me to really use that opportunity to look at and reframe what happened from a place of just pure shame and confusion to, oh, okay, I get it. This was some kind of initiation of power that I needed to experience. And it was very healing to do it and very scary. So 9 months later, took that long, these videos came out that they were attacking me. And what he did was he took my story, which was, in storytelling, I don't know if any of you tell stories, but it's not, he transcribed it like a legal deposition. It's like, well, she said this thing happened on this date, but that wasn't the date. Da, da, da. That's not, I had to compress 3 years into 15 minutes. And so I had to play around with, details, but I mean, everything in it was true with a capital T, but there were details that wasn't exactly, because I couldn't figure out how do I condense this huge thing into, 1 minute or whatever. And so he would take those things and say, see, she's a liar, and therefore, discredit everything, but then not respond to the key things I was saying about him. He's very good at using language and words to twist things and turn them against people. One of the things, and so he just lied in those stories. He lied about so many things. Like he lied and he said, after everything blew up, I called him up and I was hysterical, such a, feminine word, hysterical because, I was worried we would get sued and I would lose all my money. And I had a trust fund. I didn't have a trust fund, but I would lose my money because of the board and, and that none of that is true. But I was furious because he had gotten me and several really prominent rabbis with a lot of integrity to vouch for him, around and his integrity at a time when it turned out he was sleeping with students and staff and doing all kinds of things that he had promised he would never do. And he had gotten us to put so much time and energy and effort into promoting him as someone who, was not capable of doing anything wrong. And it turns out he's doing all these horrible things at the same time as we're putting all this into it and putting our names on the line. And I was furious with him. And so that was that call, but that's not how he framed it. And another thing that he does is he takes intimate details of vulnerable things that he knows about people, and then he uses them against them. So when we were sexual, there was a period where we kind of got into very light kind of vanilla bondage, just I had a clothesline in my drawer and, we just had some fun with it. It was not a big deal. I have no shame around it. In the video, I have a drawer full of whips, chains, and handcuffs. And I was really into really kinky stuff and pain and all this stuff. And I got him into it. And now, and I'm not, and I mean, I have no judgment, but I'm not, and I don't have any of those things. But he makes it sound like I am now ashamed of those things that we did and that part of me. And so that shame turned me against him. And that's why I did this dramatic turn after everything blew up, and I used to be his best friend and now I'm his enemy. How could that happen? It's only because I'm ashamed of my sexuality. So that was hard. That was one of the harder things that was in those videos. I mean, the good thing is because there were 17, very few people went through all of them. It's just too much. And also everyone I talked to who tried to listen to him, within 10 seconds, they could just feel this guy is lying and he's full of shit. And it's so clear that what he's doing here. And so I think not that many people have really watched. But there was a period where when you Googled my name, those videos came up first, and that was hard. And I think you're right. I mean, people see that and, they go, well, I'm not going to risk, he knows all kinds of things about me. He uses that as collateral. And so people are scared.
Can I say something there? When I watched some of them, because as you said, you can only get through so many, and I did it on double speed because it was like, I can't handle too much time watching this guy anyway, and it's such blah anyway. To me, I sat there and I thought to myself, okay, if you feel that someone has wronged you and said things that are untrue, a simple statement, one video statement of, this person put out this video about me, these were lies, here's some information about how I see that was a lie, end of story, 5 minutes, you could get away with it. To have 17 videos, and the one that you referred to, I did see some of that, and I just thought to myself, okay, you have twisted that all the way around to now bring as much shame as you possibly can to this woman, to hurt her, to try to make her feel small, to discredit her, to turn this around of like, you're the biggest victim. And it made me incredibly angry, to be honest. And it was at that point through my research where I really had to just stop, because it was like, I feel like I can see this as black and white. And I really want people that are listening to just pause for a second. And the big piece that has come from this Aubrey thing is like, many of us felt something in our bodies, right? We felt it. Then there was this conversation that had these tones that if you don't really get this conversation, it's maybe you're not that as highly evolved. It wasn't said like that, but it was very in that tone. So you should question yourself and think about that. That's where that, mental dissonance comes in, because you're feeling one thing, you're thinking another, you're actually someone who does go, oh, am I projecting my shit onto these people? Maybe I should check in. So then you've got like all these things happening, you can't make sense of what you're feeling, and then you feel confused and like, whoa. I really want to say to people, do the research on this guy, watch the videos, because the more time you spend on that, and I mean, whether you want to or not, but you can separate it out. There's a clear line, in my personal opinion, and what this has shown me to trust my read. This has been a big journey, and I felt something. To have a whole website dedicated to discrediting in such menacing and ugly ways anyone who shares something against him. And yet when you see him there's a Dr. Phil episode, he will not address, as you said before, the actual accusations in a way where he truly takes responsibility. He uses, I take responsibility for, and it's this little edge bit. Oh, yes, I was involved with her. That was wrong. But no. That's not the part you're taking responsibility for. Oh, he says it. I take responsibility. But he's like so on the fringe of that responsibility and will not address. And then there's all that words and manipulation, and he's a victim in every situation. I think every intelligent person out there can stop and say, how can one human have such a long trail of people who have such, want to publicly, in knowing full well that they're going to be attacked potentially or put on a website, share their experiences? And like, so many have, but so many haven't, because as you said, like in yours, it was a horrible experience for you to go through. It's there. It's all there. A man has a website who's just, here's my victimhood and here's my rebuttal to that, and will never actually take responsibility for the things he does. He sidesteps it every single time. And something else I wanted to say to that, I think it's sociopath is a label he's been given in terms of the way that he thinks, and his inability to have an empathy for others and really see that he's done wrong, believes his own stories. I know somebody like that. I've had an experience with someone like that in Japan. And I want to say this too, that there's always two sides to these people. There are the people that are like, oh no, this person, you just don't, you don't get him. And then there's everyone else who's experienced that person. And what I really heard you say once before or earlier was, it's literally a ticking time bomb. And I say this to people in my town, like, I don't want to say don't deal with this person, but I've had my experience. Someone said to me, you should avoid this person. I was like, well, I want to make my own assumptions about people, and I'm not going to just prejudge someone because others have had a bad experience. So I'm going to be open. And I got burned. And so I always say to people, it's only a matter of time. These people cannot keep up the lies, keep up the victimhood, because it's just a matter of time before you're the victim. You're the one who is subjected to the wrath, the whatever it is that this person really has bubbling under the surface, because they can't really keep a lid on that. It's a ticking time bomb.
Totally. I think when I saw that Aubrey took on MG, I said to my husband, like, this is not going to end well. And I mean, MG has already, really messed up Aubrey. Just, this whole thing that's happening to Aubrey now, which Aubrey is refusing to talk about MG, but MG really is the source of everything that blew up with that. And just also two things. One, I was looking through old emails of women who were involved with MG, and it was striking to me how every single one of them used the word sociopath. Everyone. And so these are people who knew him the best, and they all said that. It was very striking. And one more thing I'll add is one thing that Aubrey says, and a lot of people say is, well, he might have a controversial history, or, I haven't seen anything or whatever, but his teachings are so brilliant. It's worth it. It's worth the risk. And my response to that is a spiritual teacher should not be so compromised. A spiritual teacher needs to have more integrity. It's not like we're talking about a painter or an engineer. Whatever. It's a spiritual teacher, and they just need to have more integrity. Two, I believe that his teachings are very much tainted by his pathologies, by his narcissism, by his sex addiction. 100%. I see it all the time. They're not pure. They're not clean. And three, the teachings are not integrated, so like he teaches about the importance of the field of value, but the values that he actually lives by are not healthy, not good. He creates pain. He creates trauma. He creates chaos wherever he goes. He creates divisiveness wherever he goes. So it's like, I would rather learn from someone who is living a very simple, humble life, just walking their talk, without grandiose plans to change the world. Just be in integrity, be simple, and that's not what's happening here. And I think his grandiosity is actually creating a lot of these problems, because he feels such an extreme need to, do big things, and he needs a lot of money for it. And so he's very good at separating people from their money. Very good. And he's doing it with Aubrey. I think Aubrey is funding his great library, but he has no shame about finding wealthy people and getting their money. And he's able to convince them that it's for a great cause. So he doesn't have integrity around money, around power, around sex. Should that kind of person be seen as a leader? I don't think so. I think we just need more humble, simple people, that we emulate.
So a couple things there. Aubrey has shared in at least 2 of his recent episodes that he is having some stress around money, whether that's connected to MG, we don't know. And also what you're talking about as far as integrity with spiritual teachers, I would encourage everyone to recognize that spiritual teachers should not be having sexual relations with their students, which is a pattern that you've mentioned here. And that, I think he talks about, I think it was one of your response videos, excuse me. He talked about how there's not an issue with a spiritual teacher having consenting relationships with students. And I think if we look back at his justifications for any allegations against him, the 14-year-old was consenting, the 16-year-old was consenting, right? So he has very blurry ethical lines. And, if we look at any sort of, we can look at problems with religious organizations, but even within religious organizations, there are standards in terms of the leaders not having sexual relations with their students for very good reasons, because there is this power dynamic that gets blurred, and I think if he had better ethics, he wouldn't have all these allegations against, maybe there might be a couple allegations, but to have this many allegations against someone, right? There's always a potential for false allegations to come forward. And I think that's what he's been saying is that, oh, these are false. These are smear campaigns. But if you are living carelessly and you don't have any container with which you're acting sexually, like this is how the situation gets muddy. And then regarding the sociopath comment, he has used as a defense that he has passed polygraph tests to prove, quote unquote, prove that he is innocent against these allegations. I think specifically in regards to the situation with the teens. And number one, well, I'm going to say one thing, and I think you have more information about the specifics of the polygraph test, but sociopaths are more likely to pass a polygraph than a person who does not have sociopathic tendencies because they do not have the same physiological responses that would create the that would trigger the polygraph to sense whether someone's being dishonest or not. So that to me is, that's one of his justifications or his defenses against these claims is that, oh, I passed a polygraph test or multiple polygraph tests. But that's one reason where he may have passed them. But, because of who he is, he may have passed it. But then also with regards to the questions, and you can speak to this more specifically, they weren't really asking what the allegations were. They were questions that were kind of not related to the actual allegations. Is that correct?
Correct. Like, for instance, with Sarah, the 13, 14-year-old, they asked, did you have anal with her? Did you have oral with her? Did you have intercourse with her? And those aren't the right questions. He didn't have, and he said no, and that was truthful. But he did, according to her records online and what she told me personally, he did make her touch his penis, and he did digitally penetrate her, even though he keeps saying to Aubrey, like, it was just teenage necking, nothing below the waist. Well, that's not how she remembers it. And everything she said to me had the ring of truth that his lies don't. And also, then there was a thing about the love letter that she supposedly wrote him afterwards that he swore to me. That's what he swore about on his children's lives, that proves that it was a loving, consensual relationship, which, first of all, she was 14. And I mean, she was a child. Like, it doesn't prove anything. Like, he should have not been with someone that young, and don't keep saying he was 20 when it went through till he was 20. And, he should have known better and, stop using that letter to justify. But she told me, and she has said also online, I said, what about the letter? Like, she was saying, why did you defend him? And I said, well, there was a letter. And she said, why would I write a letter to my abuser? Like, she was shocked, and so he had the polygraph guy, have him answer, was there a letter? Because he lost it conveniently. And the polygraph guy, and you could see on the polygraph, it says, this is a horrible question for a polygraph. It's just a memory thing. 30 years later, a better question would be to ask Sarah if she wrote the letter, not him if he remembers that he got a letter, And so he keeps saying, but the polygraph proves that I wrote her a letter. Again, not that proves anything. She was a child, but, but Aubrey doesn't understand these things. And he just, is just following the realtor's, inspection report. But anyway, I want to say something too about, the sleeping with students, having sex with students. And for me, one thing that is shocking, and I'm still shocked by it after all these years, is how he keeps getting in trouble, and each time is an opportunity for him to change and stop doing things that will get him in trouble, right? I mean, I was so excited when everything exploded by Khadash in 2006 because I had been seeing problematic behavior, and I thought, okay, he's lost everything. His country, his family, his home, his reputation, like this will be the thing that will wake him up and stop him from acting in ways that are not moral, not healthy. But it didn't. He just, doubled down and just got more creative at creating, defenses and smear campaign ideas and all that stuff. And that has happened again and again for decades now. And so I don't know about today, but the last I heard from 3 different people as of at least 5 years ago or something, he would have students. This is what I was told by 3 different people. He would have students pay him to, meet with him in a hotel room, and they would have to pay for the hotel room, convenient to him. And there they would have sex in what he called the Holy of Holies. And he makes it sound like it's a sacred, beautiful thing. And like you said, like with a student teacher relationship, there isn't real consent, they're possible in that way because he's able to convince them that this is a good thing. And he did that with me all the time. There were so many things I did not want to do sexually. And he would just use his fancy language and all that and convince me that this is the divine feminine or what, I don't know, some tantric thing. And so anyway, he's still, from what I heard, not too far back, sleeping with students. So, but hopefully one of the things I am hoping that comes out of this episode is that more people, especially from recent years, are willing to speak up because, I haven't been in his community for almost 20 years, but again, I hear the stories. I see that he hasn't changed, that he just keeps getting more weirdly sexual and more slippery and more kind of hard to pin down and more diabolical in the ways that he silences people. So we'll see. I mean, it's hard to be the only one right now, but I think there's a few more who are starting to come forward. And I would encourage anyone who has their own experience to speak up because there's power in numbers, and he has no power on his own. He's like I don't know. I think of him as like
a parasite.
He's a parasite. Totally. He's an energy vampire. He sucks at other people's light and energy, and he finds women who are, have a lot of it, and then he sucks it out of them and sucks them dry. I've seen it happen again and again. A lot of women end up very ill, physically ill from being involved with him. But sometimes I think of him as like one of those Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade hot air balloons, like really big, but it's just full of hot air and you just prick it and it's just like collapses into nothing. Like that's kind of who he is, but he likes to, act as if he's so grand and he's not. He's nothing without the power that all these people give to him, but he's nothing.
And in response to what Donna just shared there, that we will have an email address that's available, or it's below in the show notes for anyone who might be listening who has got something that they want to share, and you can reach out to Donna herself as a safe place to connect, to come forward with your story if you wish, to talk to her, to just have someone who understands what you're going through. Donna has created an email so that you can get in touch with her.
Yes, and it's really been very healing for people who were previously involved to find each other, because there's something about being involved in his world that is very crazy making and very confusing. And once we start talking and sharing it's validating. It's like, oh, it's not me. It was him. And he's done this before. And it's like just the connection is, even if it doesn't go anywhere else, and it's not about, and then we're going to do a big expose, and it's not that, it's just, there's power in numbers, and there's healing in, the women coming together, not just women. I mean, I've heard from men, colleagues, students of his who really felt very messed up by their association with him.
Which might be Aubrey, right? Because what we're seeing, my sense is with Aubrey, just from observing him, like he right now he's trying to understand what went wrong. And whether he's not able to speak out due to not seeing it yet, or not feeling like he can publicly say anything against his teacher for whatever reason, he is shutting down any sort of conversation, looking at what people have been sensing about him. And so, like you mentioned in our call originally, the reverse Midas touch, right? Everything he touches turns to shit. And so for Aubrey to say that this is the hardest month that he's ever experienced, his dad died. I'm sure that was hard. But to be, and he's referred to it as a witch hunt, which is very much the language of Gafni, right? I did not see what happened as a witch hunt. I saw it as Kate and I spoke about how refreshed we were at how thoughtful the comments were. Yes, they were being critical, but they were calling out what they saw as a distortion in a respectful way. There were so many comments that were like, hey man, I love you, and this doesn't feel right. It was like bookends with like, we love you, and we can't go along with this. And so for it to say like, this is just haters on the internet, it's like, I think there's something more that he's recognizing in terms of how he got where he got. I mean, his followers knew that he was polyamorous. And so, yes, I think a lot of people were reacting to the pain that they saw Vailana expressing. And I think what happened there was with Aubrey was given permission to continue down this path of pushing his wife to, yes, let's do this, because he had this teacher there saying, yes, this is the way to, enlightenment wasn't the word, but that's a sense of like, to your growth, to your evolution, is like continuing down this path. And they continue to push her beyond her comfort level, beyond where she felt safe. And I think he was able to do that because of the permission of his teacher, who he deferred to, who he looked to, who he trusted. And so the disconnect I see is that this wasn't actually a hate campaign against Aubrey. This was a criticism of true distortion that people sensed. And some people, there were a lot of people were like that thought this was about polyamory. This really was not about polyamory. This was about how it was done. And I think how it was done was a result of the guidance of Gafni. And so many people did speak out to that. But like we said before, that wasn't demonstrated in the comments, because anything that went against Gafni was deleted. And that goes along with the whole online narrative that he creates. And so, we mentioned this website. I'm sure in the comments below, we're going to get people who are in the role that you once played, that you mentioned regretted, that you feel remorse for participating as the person of creating the narrative for him. He currently has a team that reaches out when, I'm sure Kate and I will get an email to us telling us how, maybe we're defaming him or whatever, trying to instill a little bit of fear in us. But there is, you can go to whoismarcgafni.com already. And, because it's probably going to be in the comments as well. Because there is going to be someone that's going to try to dispute everything that was shared in this conversation so far. And so that's what we see as far as Aubrey's comment section deleting anything negative about Gafni. It's like this narrative control that mirrors the narrative control of what Gafni does. And so I think that why I am so grateful for you speaking up is that I don't think Aubrey can speak up right now. Like, he's in a very vulnerable position. Who knows what Gafni knows about him, that, let's talk about leverage, right? What happens when he gets someone in a compromised position? He knows a lot of their secrets, and we've seen that he weaponizes them, right? Like, he turned around what happened with you and him sexually. He turned that around and he used that against you for speaking out. And so, for those listening, I personally feel that Aubrey wants to say something, but he can't.
Yes. So I would say MG would be probably slightly less likely to attack Aubrey than someone like me, because I have less power and influence and wealth than Aubrey. But yeah, I'm sure there's some concern about secrets being shared and all that. I want to go back to something you said about how people knew that Aubrey was polyamorous and that wasn't the issue. I would say the last 7 years since Aubrey was with Vailana, they were monogamous, and that was the big deal. And there were all these, episodes and workshops that they taught on their holy, amazing monogamy. And then when this episode came out, it turned out that they've been with Alana, the third person, for like a year or at least maybe 2 years, and lying about it the whole time. Yeah. That is a Gafni thing. It's right. All about
he's been his integrity he's compromised his integrity, which is what you spoke to, is a tactic. And it's kind of like I see him now, it's like soul searching, like, how did I get here? Like, in his mind, he was so blindsided by what happened, the response to the episode, because in his little bubble, in his Marc Gafni world, everything he was doing is okay. But it's like you said, going into the house, and the people that are with fresh eyes are like, no, this is not okay. And it's like he's been living in this distorted bubble, and alternative perspectives are telling him, no, this is not what you think you're in.
And I hope that. Sorry. I was just going to say, I think too, what you're speaking to is he's in that state of confusion that many of us felt, right? He's now got the head going, wait a second, because I've been trusting this feeling I had in my body where I thought I could trust this guy. But now his head's messed. He's questioning, he's experiencing the dissonance, and I don't think he can make sense of it quite yet.
I hope that he has wise elders around him to counsel him. And I think he thinks of MG as a wise elder, and that's his mistake. MG is not a wise elder. MG is a toxic influence, and it's really harming Aubrey. And, I don't know that, I was wondering if Vailana and Alana are able to pick up on, MG's energy a little more just because they're women. But you could see from that video, Vailana also defers to MG. She thinks of him as her teacher as well. So it would take a lot for them to break the spell. I mean, I could talk about the 5 ways to break free of Marc Gafni if this would be a good place for it.
Yeah,
I mean, when he's ready, I've found just from experience that the only way to really break the spell and heal from that kind of really toxic entanglement is 5 things. First, 0 contact, no talking, no texting, emails, nothing for minimum 3 months. Minimum. Longer would be better. 2 is start talking to all the people that he doesn't want you talking to. All the people that he said, don't trust this person, they're a liar. All the people that he has said bad things about, those are the people that know the things that you need to know. And just start comparing stories, and the lies will start to emerge, and it will give you clarity and strength. 3 is do as much research as possible on narcissists, sociopaths, Enneagram 3s, cult leaders. Keith Raniere seems to be very similar in a lot of ways. And so like watch The Vow, or, just find out more about Keith Raniere, and just learn how these dynamics operate and how people get caught up in it. So it'll help explain, oh, that's what he was doing when he manipulated me that way. It's very helpful. Because I didn't know anything about narcissists when I was with him. It was a long time ago, and there wasn't like books everywhere and stuff. And so once I started learning about that, suddenly it was just like click, click, click. Oh, he was gaslighting me. Oh my God. When he told me that thing that definitely happened did not happen, he was gaslighting me. It's like, I didn't understand back then. So to study about that stuff helps. The 4th thing is to really clear your energy field of him. And that can take a while. Especially if you've been physical with him, it could be really hard. Like people have said, there's some dark entities involved, and it took me years to and many shamans and exorcists. And I mean, it's dark stuff. And every single person I saw said, we've never seen an entity so dark and so powerful. Everyone said that. So that was intense. And just to clarify, like, there's MG, who at the core I found very sweet and loving and wonderful, and that's the part I so enjoyed. And then there's this dark part, demon, whatever you want to call it, I don't know, that through his woundedness, he's allowed to infiltrate and kind of take over. And that's the part that will be toxic and will, attach itself to you too. So clear that. And then the fifth thing is to do your own shadow work around, how did I get involved in this? What was my contribution? What was my vulnerability that I allowed myself to be exploited in this way? And so that you could really learn and not have it happen again. So I think at this point, Aubrey's in too deep, and it's also very public. Like, a lot of prominent people who used to support MG and finally walked away very quietly because they were ashamed and they didn't know how to explain it. And, and that's unfortunate because it leaves fewer people to say, hey, everyone, like, warning, I got caught up. Don't do what I did, So in a perfect world, I would love if Aubrey does manage to break free and then, disavows his connection to MG and warns people away from him if he feels that, but the reason I'm speaking up now has nothing to do with wanting to convince Aubrey of anything. I don't ultimately really care what Aubrey does. It's more about, like you said, helping people who felt confused and off when they saw MG and felt like there's something not right here, to be able to validate their intuition and say, yeah, there's something not right here. And so Aubrey is in a whole nother category, and he's on his own journey, and he's in so deep, it's going to take him a long time to heal from this, but this is not for him.
I just want to say that you mentioned how hard it is to disentangle from his energy and whatever experience that you had and probably others had. He, in his response videos to you, he called you obsessed, which is, it's that tactic of, turning it back on you. Like, of course, like you and all those that got enmeshed with him, there is a process of healing, and to turn it around that you're obsessed, because that's a tactic to discredit you, right? Like, oh, she's just obsessed with me. But really, it's like you had this really impactful, traumatic experience, and therefore, and you've become witness to all these other people that he has impacted in even more intense ways than what you experienced. And in those videos, he turns it around that you're and frames it as you're obsessed. So I just, should anyone actually be able to watch those videos, that's an interesting tactic that he used. And then also with those videos, you spoke about how many people who have supported him, their support eventually, they either just kind of slowly, quietly stepped away, no longer supported him. And in the beginning of those videos, he had a woman named Lisa do an introduction as a way of another, we haven't spoken to this. Something that we wanted to do was show this video that Aubrey is pointing to when anyone brings up Gafni's history, because they did do a video 2 years ago with Gafni, Marc, Aubrey, and his Gafni's partner Christina, and it's almost like, let's bring a woman out that will endorse me as support that I'm a good person. I'm not a predator. I'm not this bad person that these smear campaigns have labeled me as. And so let's talk about that Lisa and what other information we have about her since that those videos that he's still using to discredit you. that woman, Lisa, has now no longer is supportive of Marc. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, so Lisa is someone who he brought in to be a woman supporter. He always brings in a woman to make him look better. And she's making a video that we will include here where she explains how she got involved and how she feels about the whole thing now.
Hello, this is Amanda. I am in the process of editing right now, and I wanted to include some clips from the video that Lisa just published that tells her side of the story, since she was a part of creating the many videos that Marc Gafni used in his explanation in defense of what he claims to be multiple smear campaigns. So I'm just going to show you 2 clips now that are part of a larger video on Lisa's channel, which we will link to in the show notes below. So you can go ahead after you watch this video, go over to her video and you can watch the whole thing to hear the whole story. But I feel like these 2 clips support what we've said in this episode, and we want to make sure to include them here.
So I became one of Marc Gafni's students in 2015, and then I eventually found myself in part of his inner circle back when the organization was called the Center for Integral Wisdom. So my official role in that organization was executive vice president and director of marketing. So I'm not just someone from the outside. I was really in the inside and one of his students. And I conducted many of the interviews in that long list of videos intended to set the record straight and clear Marc Gafni's name. And Marc is still using those same videos that I helped to create, that I appear in, to try to clear his name and promote a version of himself that isn't accurate and isn't true at all. So here's what I want to say, and to make clear, is that I left Marc Gafni's community in 2019 under extremely painful circumstances because of what I came to see as his repeated abuse of power. And I do not in any way stand by any of the content that I helped create to defend him that's on that website. I want to make that clear. This video is my way of setting the record straight. It's also my step in making amends for the harm that I know that I caused by participating in creating and distributing those videos, harm that I caused, especially to the women who suffered abuse by Marc Gafni, including Sarah and Judy and Donna and Haya. And so I want to offer my deepest apologies directly to all of you. So what happened was, at a certain point, after literally hundreds of hours of reading through emails, articles, transcripts, blog posts, interviews, something started to click for me. Something started to shift. Patterns began to emerge, and details that I had been previously glossing over started to stand out for me. And this entire narrative that Marc Gafni was the victim of a massive smear campaign began to unravel. It began to crumble. And what I realized was that Marc had placed in my hands the very evidence that revealed his abuse of power, including emails that didn't just suggest poor judgment, but that showed clear patterns of manipulation and coercion and control. And it was as if he trusted that my belief in him would be stronger than the objective facts. And for a long time, it actually was, but eventually I was able to see all through that. And when I finally recognized that I had been caught in the very same power dynamics that so many of these women had described, and that I had been complicit in vilifying them. When I realized that, I was stunned. It felt like the whole ground beneath me fell away. I felt tricked. I felt angry. I felt deep remorse for the harm that I had caused, harm that I now see that I contributed to, even though that was unintentional and unknowingly and unintentionally. So leaving the Center for Integral Wisdom wasn't simple at all. I didn't make a public announcement. I didn't write a takedown blog post. I just quietly stepped away in 2019, completely severing my ties with Marc. And then I went into basically a spiritual and psychological free fall. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of anger. There was a lot of shame, and it took me a long time to metabolize. I went to therapy so that I could metabolize and process what had happened and reclaim parts of myself that I didn't even realize that I had given away. And that's part of why it's taken me so long to speak publicly, because for a long time I didn't feel like I could. I was focused on healing, on making sense of my experience, what the hell happened here, and on taking responsibility in a way that felt real for me and not performative and out there. But when this recent wave of public conversation erupted in Aubrey's community, it felt like karma knocking at my door reminded me that the only way to complete this karmic cycle is to speak the truth and to take full responsibility for the part that I played in all of this.
So hopefully you guys got something out of that. And we encourage you, like I said, to go ahead and also watch all of Lisa's video to hear her story, to get a more full picture of what it's like to be involved with Marc Gafni.
Now she's not involved with him anymore, and she left, feels very strongly the opposite of how she used to feel about him. And, but she's a good example of a very smart, amazing person that, he was able to exploit to make him look good, and others who were trying to get the truth out about him look bad, and, it was hard for me when I saw those videos that he used her to do that. It's painful. It's like he turns women against each other. And I mean, one of the hardest things for me after I left his world was I had to do some really, really painful apologies to people that, like the two teenage girls, no longer teenage girls, but, for my cover up, to all the people that I had lied to. I mean, being in his world we used to call it just secrets and lies. It's just secrets and lies. And, because he forbids you to tell anyone about what's going on about your sexual relationship. He says you can't even write in your journal. You can't tell your therapist. You cannot talk about it. And that's very toxic. And it's part of why so many of the women got very, very sick. And so when my close friends found out the extent to which I had lied to them about things, it was just a lot of hard repairs, and so anyway, it's again, the moral injuries that he inflicts on others by making them do things that they think at the time, like I thought at the time, was good, and he really plays on your sense of wanting to do good in the world. And, but then he uses that good for darkness. And that is diabolical, I think. And, so I want to also address the thing about, that you said about how he calls me obsessed. And yes, that's a way to diminish me. And, I would say a more accurate word is very concerned. Because of what I know. And because, I mean, when I think of people who were affected by him, like I think of the woman who, she shared with me that he harassed her like intensely to give him huge amounts of money, like when she was in the most harrowing days of her, cancer treatment. Like he took advantage of where she was in her cancer treatment to harass her for money. And I think of the student who was so deeply devoted to his teachings and helped him so much, and who it turned out he mind fucked her and manipulated her so toxically that she ended up the trauma therapist she went to said that he had never seen a worse case of complex PTSD based on what MG did to her. And the stories are, I mean, I won't go into details, but horrific, like horrific. Or like the teaching partner that he had, that he insisted that she fly to do a workshop with him at a time when his reputation was on the line because of the allegations and his possible divorce. And it wouldn't look good if she wasn't there. But she had meningitis, and her doctor had said, if you get on a plane, you could die and you cannot fly. And MG just like pushed and pushed. You have to be there for me. My life is on the line. It's my fucking life on the line. It's the whole movement is on the line. And so she flew, and she was my roommate, that week, and she was in bed like the whole time because she was so sick, and like he doesn't care so much about other people's health, and so, or like the woman who she counseled in such a manipulative way that it destroyed her relationship, and she tried to commit suicide. I mean, those are just a few random stories. I have many stories, and they're documented. Like I have evidence, of this, and none of these people will ever go public. But I know these things, and I know what he's capable of, and I know what he's still doing. And a lot of this is not long time ago. I think for me, a big part of my healing was when I realized after by Hadash and he didn't change. I kept thinking this will change him. I realized, oh my God, he's not capable of change. And that was shocking to me, but I didn't really understand about personality disorders. Like I think he has, I mean, I'm not diagnosing, but I think he has a personality disorder because what else would explain that his inability to change when his life has been blown up so many times, and yet he still continues with the same toxic, dangerous behaviors that get him in trouble every time, and continues to defend himself as if he's an innocent victim. What? So if you're looking at him like a normal person, it just doesn't make sense. But personality disorder, okay, he's never going to change. And so that means I don't think he should be teaching, because when he's in a position of, again, I'm not trying to cancel him, and, he'll do what he wants, but I mean, I saw that as a comment on someone posted something on a recent video, and they were saying, oh, he has this history, blah, blah, blah. And someone wrote underneath, people change. I would say he does not change.
I just commented on that today, and I said, and some don't, right? That's funny. Yeah. I mean, that I had that actually in this, when we were researching or when we were having these podcast episodes, I asked the question, and I think I mentioned in the episode, I'm like, I hope that, I don't know what episode it was, but we were talking about like narcissistic personality disorder, and it's like, we were talking about Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, but that was kind of spurred. This was a different conversation, but it was inspired by these conversations around this whole Aubrey Marcus situation, and prompted me to start researching: can people with narcissistic personality disorder, can they actually heal? And the research says a portion of them can, but another portion of them cannot. And so, and that seems to be like what we're seeing here is that, if he's so good at reinventing himself, okay, so he gets dismissed from this group, he leaves and he goes and finds, if he's not actually doing any work, and he then can just go insert himself in another relationship, another dynamic, he doesn't have to change. And then, it's like he knows how to do it. But I guess, you don't want to cancel a man, but at the same time, I'm with you as far as, like, he only has the power if people give him the power, right? And so if his stories are shared, people's experiences with him are shared, if this situation with Aubrey Marcus is so public, and eventually Aubrey Marcus comes forward with his experience, like, how it'd be really hard, I imagine, for him to reinvent himself again. And maybe that's what is necessary for him to actually hit true rock bottom. I'm sure he's been at some rock bottoms in the experiences that he's had, but for it to be so public that he can't just, explain it away with some SEO and some hit pieces on his accusers, right? Because if say Aubrey were to come forward and share his experience, like that would be a permission slip for so many people to then also share their story in a safer way, right? Because his tactics have been put on display, and he can't deny it. And I want to direct people to go watch the whole Dr. Phil interview, because that is a different man. That is a man that is sitting in front of another man who sees right through him. He's asking him questions that he can't weasel his way out of. And you just see him struggling to, and part of me was like, oh man, if I was falsely accused, I would feel really uncomfortable having these questions asked of me too. But I don't think at the end I came around, I'm like, no, that's not what's happening there. Dr. Phil sees through him and he called him out. And so I think everyone, if anyone is doubting this, I say to go watch that whole interview and just feel in your body what you feel from what is the integrity of this person. When you can just rationalize, sleeping with having those relationships and kind of just dismissing what the women are saying. And so anyways, I guess my point being that I feel that the only disinfectant here is light. The true him coming to be exposed, and only then maybe he can transform and heal. I don't know. Maybe it's not this lifetime. I don't know. But, if people do not give him the power, he can't take it. So it's up to us to share what we're sharing and for people to make up their own minds. And it's not just him. It's where is this dynamic playing out in other spiritual teachers, other people that we put on pedestals? This is an example of how it's done. And so if we're paying attention to everything that Donna has shared here, we can notice red flags a lot earlier, and recognize that there are these people out there that have these ways of manipulating us. And, it's not to say that we should be completely defensive and put up walls, right? I feel like he gets in through our vulnerabilities, our own shadows, as you said, to really get through is to understand where we're vulnerable. And that's how, Kate and I, the episode we did on the Bewitched series, that was what these women came away with, is that this woman got in through their shadows, their vulnerabilities, and their weaknesses. And that's how people like him are very skilled at recognizing what those are. And so it's just more invitation for us to do our own work, so then we can recognize where can people like this get in, and and from a larger perspective, maybe our interactions with them is so we can see where we're porous, right? Where we can let those in, and hopefully we don't have to have such traumatic experiences to learn those lessons. But so I guess this is a teaching experience, really, what we're sharing here, specifically about this man, but in a broader context as well, in terms of these are the mechanisms of how this happens.
Yes, right. And it's common. I mean, and there's these charismatic, toxic leaders all over, and they will always find followers. Even, Charles Manson had women writing to him in prison, who wanted him to be their teacher, right? I'm not putting
equating.
MG on. Yeah. Although he'll probably accuse me of that, but I'm just saying he will always find followers, but the more people are willing to speak out, and, with back in the older days, when he was younger, in Israel, before Bay Hadash, there were 8 scandals. There were 8 places that I know of. There might have been more that he was thrown out of because of, abuses of power and money and sex or sex. And he just had to keep always reinventing himself and going, from conservative to or Orthodox to the West Bank to Jerusalem to, and each time he'd get in trouble, and, it's just, but there was no social media then. It wasn't really internet then. People didn't know. And then, just as time goes on, it's just easier to spread information, but he has to keep reinventing himself. And, he had to leave different denominations within Judaism, but then he had to leave Judaism altogether because the Jews didn't want anything to do with him. And then he reinvented himself. He kind of finagled his way into the integral world, and then the sounds true world, and then the new thought world. And each time, he just finds people who will support him and ignore the past or whatever. And then it falls apart inevitably. And then he has to find somewhere else. So Aubrey is just the latest of so many, but as each scandal happens, he has to add another 100 pages to his Who is Marc Gafni website. Pretty soon it's going to be 10 billion pages, each person will have 37 videos and, and it's just a little too much, and so at some point it's like a line will cross. And so for me, what's really interesting is like when that Dr. Phil episode aired in, I think it was 2018, maybe 2017, something like that. The response from, Dr. Phil's viewers are not the meta modern spiritual world, they're, and who were accepting MG as like, well, he's so brilliant. So maybe he did something in the past, but he's so brilliant, And so what was interesting for me is when that episode aired, I was looking at reactions like on YouTube and comments on Dr. Phil's Facebook page. And it was like amazing. It was like the reaction to Aubrey's thing. It was like thousands of comments. Every single one were like, this guy is definitely a liar. Definitely an abuser. He's just like my rapist uncle. He's just, I wanted to throw my TV out the window. I've never hated a guest on Dr. Phil so much, which that's saying a lot. And just, 201, like every single one, like they saw right through him. Every single one. It's like, he is so lying. He is so lying. And these are like simpler people, but they felt in their bodies, like just the same as people felt when they were watching the radical monogamy video. Like there's something not right with this guy. I could feel it, and I feel ick. I feel yuck. I don't want to hear him. I don't want to see him. And so, I think to me, what's really interesting is that he's able to convince his current followers that, he is the next Jesus Christ, the next Leonardo da Vinci, who's going to create the next Renaissance, like this kind of grand savior complex. And yet anytime he steps into the larger world, the more mainstream world, like the reaction is so negative, and so I don't think he's going to really get that far. I know. Thank goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the same thing with the comments in the Aubrey video. So many people spoke to their personal lived experience. I've seen this pattern. I've had people say this to me, like, it hit a real depth in people seeing him up there and recognizing it, and it's just a shame that was closed for conversation, because it's an important spiritual lesson that we're here to learn, this trust in our read, our sense of intuition, our discernment, because I think, I do think that as I sat preparing for this conversation, thinking about how I hoped that what we share today, helps people to heal, and thought, I hope also that it could be a healing for Gafni. And then I also know that not everyone is here to have the full experience of healing. Maybe they're here to hold that dark. And if that is the case, then may he truly be an opportunity for us to actually see what that stands for, see what those behaviors really are, see what they do, and reclaim for ourselves that choice to be like, okay, I recognize it, and I step away, and I trust my inner knowing, I trust my inner read, like whether he heals or not, and, we'll see, has he hit his rock bottom? We don't know. But either way, he is a powerful catalyst for us to see dark and return to light, and like to hold that light by pulling back, by being aware of those patterns. And, that's really the power in your story today, is this bringing that voice to that gap and that response that people really felt in their bodies, and validating it so that we can do that inner work as you said, to be like, okay, I recognize it. Where's my healing? How can I be more sovereign and strong and aware of those patterns? Because we are going through a big awakening, a collective. And I think because so much is changing so often, there is a destabilizing in how we feel within. And so I just feel like it's a vulnerable time for us when we want to ask questions and we want to grow, and there are these toxic kind of spiritual leaders out there giving promises of like things we all desire, a greater sense of self, a growth, a greater connection to God, to have a big positive impact in this time of change. And so that discernment and that feeling is just so powerful right now.
Yeah, I think it's part of also the shift from patriarchal thinking to more of bringing in the feminine and honoring our own lived wisdom and discernment. And that's part of why it's so frustrating that MG has co-opted the feminine, the divine feminine, like he does in that video with Christina. And it just feels so abusive, that he claims it, for himself when he actually, like, is it really okay to invoke the divine feminine, as someone that you're responsible for bringing into the world when you are harming actual women? Like, I don't think that's okay, So, I think he's actually, there's this great article by Paul Levy about how MG uses the whole influence of Wetiko in MG's ability to get supposedly conscious leaders to support him. And in it, he says, the MG is ultimately a great teacher for us because he's showing us these things. Like, we get to see it in living color. I mean, it's very dramatic with him. And so, but we need to learn the lessons. And so part of what I'm hoping for our conversation today is that there's a little more clarity, because he's really good at creating confusion and murkiness. And then it's hard to know, like, wait, what's going on? What's the truth there? And then we can't really get, like, why is this happening? But ultimately, I think this whole situation is such a gift, for all of us. So I'm grateful for it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap up here for today?
I think I want to bring up something that MG says a lot, which is that he complains that he has offered many, many times to talk to his accusers in a mediated, safe setting in which we could do fact checking and, just clear things and heal. And he seems very dismayed that nobody is taking him up on this offer. And so, as someone who has not taken him up on this offer, I want to explain why no one will do that. And also say that it's frustrating to me that Aubrey, like in the video that we're talking about, doesn't challenge him on this. But Aubrey doesn't seem to really understand much about how these things work. So this will be an education for everyone. Okay, first of all, as I said before, it takes a long time to get someone like MG out of your energy field. And the last thing any of us want is to be in contact with him in any way. There was a period in like around 2020, something like that. For 2 years, he moved to Portland when everything blew up for him. And the only place he had to live was with this other abusive guru named Swami Chitanandananda. And anyway, it was horrible that he was in my city. And it was very disturbing just to know we were even in the same, weather pattern. So luckily we never ran into each other. But it just, the idea that anyone would want to meet with someone who has spent so much time diminishing, dismissing, not taking any responsibility, not understanding what consent really means, not respecting our boundaries, like that we would want to meet with him. And especially, like, you see how he uses words, right? So, I mean, I remember one time I talked to him shortly after everything blew up, and I was feeling very strong and emphatic about, these are the things he did that I need to communicate, that this was not okay and this was not okay. And I'm talking to him and he starts talking back, and all of a sudden I literally could feel my energy field being sapped. I could feel my mind was suddenly very cloudy. I just couldn't think straight. I suddenly I'm like, he's telling me his story and making me feel sorry for him. And I'm starting to doubt my own reality. And I realized, I mean, I don't know if he's using mind control or energy, weird stuff, or it's just who he is. I don't know, but there's no sense of possibility of a healing conversation with him. I mean, and we don't owe him that. Nobody owes him that. This would only be to help his reputation, but it would not help any of us. It would only hurt us. It would only re-traumatize us. So it would be absurd to think that any of these women who were so hurt by him, victimized, traumatized, whatever, would be willing to meet with him. So I wish he would stop using that as, to justify, well, see, I'm willing to talk to them. It's balls in their court. This is clearly a problem with them. That's not how it works.
Yeah, I think it's important that we share that. That's, even anyone can sit and imagine the position, and you would choose not to. I mean, you just have to think of anyone you've had a challenging experience with, let alone one that's been intensely manipulative, that you would never, ever want to see them again. And as you say, it would only be to re-traumatize you with the type of person that would be, because they're not really interested in truth. It's just the reputation. And yeah,
I'm going to say that how can he expect a conversation after his approach to your anonymous presentation on stage was to the tactics that he used in those videos? I can see those are just the tactics that he's going to use in a conversation, right? And so it's not a fair, it's that whole dynamic. It's not a fair playing ground. He's not coming in with good faith to like actually have a conversation to discuss what actually happened, right? It's like, let me distort what happened and play the mind games that, unless he's healed. But at the same time, like you said, you do not owe him a conversation. And that does not negate what happened to you or anyone else, the fact that you guys don't want to have a conversation. And that's how he's trying to turn it, another tactic of turning it around on the victim of that, no, they're not willing to have a conversation with me. I'm willing to sit down with them. So they're the one that's not being fair here. And so, I think I'm glad you addressed that, because I'm sure very firsthand his tactics. Kate and I have observed his tactics and like starting to learn more who he is, like how he has handled the situation. And so I think by calling out these tactics, I'm sure we're going to see them as a result of this video. And so when people are noticing those, like that's part of his playbook. And so we're just trying to shed light on the methods that are used to perpetuate this behavior and perpetuate the illusion that he's created around who he is. And so, I'm sure that people will start to see through it. And people obviously already have, given the backlash from this episode. So, I feel like we've really gone deep here. And if I know that you have a lot more that you could talk about, but I feel like we have painted a picture in terms of a little more about who Marc Gafni really is. And anything else either you want to speak to before we wrap up today?
I would say, what we shared today is just a small percentage of the things I could talk for 17 videos about him, but, and I have a lot of really damaging information I am keeping in my back pocket.
You're pretty tame here.
Sorry?
You're pretty tame here, I would
pretty
say.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God, the things I know. And, but, I would say he shouldn't risk, like getting getting out there. I don't feel that, again, my desire is not to humiliate him or anything like that, but there's things I know that, he would not be happy if it gets out there. But ultimately, again, the intention of this is just to get the truth out there for some healing and encourage anyone who, has been confused or needs, more connections, like to speak up and be in touch. And I would say, ultimately, I really intuitively feel that even though in this lifetime it feels like MG and I are kind of adversaries for each other, that on a soul level, we kind of made this agreement to help each other through being in these roles. And he's helped me a lot by helping me, find my power and my voice and learn so many lessons. And I'm grateful for that. And I hope to help him, to connect with his integrity and truth. And, I think after we're both back on the other side, we'll probably like hug and laugh and go, well, that was a wild ride, So, I mean, I have a lot of love for just this wild adventure, that we've been on. And I also feel a deep commitment to the truth that needs to come out there and heal a lot of the damage that he's caused.
Well, thank you so much, Donna, for your courage and your bravery to come forth, having been through a response, a very confronting and awful response to the first time that you shared anonymously. So coming forward, as you have, we encourage people to leave questions on comments, because we may have Donna back and we can use those for future episodes potentially, and share this with anyone that you feel might need to see it, whether they're involved with Gafni himself or other power dynamics, maybe that's in relationship or in other spiritual circles. This could be very helpful for them to understand how these leaders are working to that don't have their best interests at heart and could be doing some real damage. And as we said, we'll have the email that you can contact Donna directly if you wish. If there's something you wish to share with her privately or your own experience. So thank you so much for listening. We will join you in the next episode.